What kind of woman smiles for cameras wearing diamonds gifted by a man accused of murder? My wife is a liar and a threat. That sentence, allegedly whispered by a shaken Prince Harry to a trusted aide during a quiet moment of crisis, would have seemed unthinkable a few short years ago. Back when the world watched with bated breath as Meghan Markle walked down the aisle into royal history, crowned not with a tiara alone, but with the weight of global adoration and media obsession. But that sentiment, raw and accusatory, is now at the center of a scandal that threatens to unravel what remains of the Sussexes' public image, and perhaps even their relationship. At the heart of this unraveling is a pair of glittering diamond earrings, beautiful and damning, given to Meghan by none other than Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, mere days after the brutal murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Before we continue, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for updates. On the surface, it was just jewelry. But in the brutal glare of hindsight, it became a statement. Not just a fashion choice, but a political endorsement wrapped in silence. For Meghan, every step she took wearing those earrings echoed the final cries of a silenced journalist whose only crime was speaking truth to power. And now, the palace aides who tried desperately to warn her, the advisors who pleaded for caution, and the intelligence officials who raised red flags are breaking their silence. What they reveal is far more sinister than a fashion faux pas. It is the story of a woman allegedly warned, who ignored those warnings. Of a royal bride given the choice between principle and privilege and choosing privilege. The controversy began quietly, almost too quietly. Few noticed the earrings at first. Worn during a glittering formal dinner in Fiji in October 2018, they were, by all public accounts, simply a stunning accessory befitting the Duchess of Sussex. Meghan looked radiant, smiling as she waved to crowds and posed for photographs beside her husband. There were no raised eyebrows then, no headlines about Saudi Arabia, about blood diamonds, about murder. But that was because the full truth hadn't yet been revealed. What the public didn't know, what only select insiders at the palace and certain intelligence figures were aware of, was that the earrings she wore had been personally gifted by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the very man implicated in the state-sanctioned assassination of Khashoggi inside a Saudi consulate just weeks earlier. To grasp the full horror of that decision, to wear those diamonds publicly and proudly, we must rewind the clock. In early October 2018, Jamal Khashoggi, a Washington Post journalist and longtime critic of the Saudi regime, entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to obtain documents for his upcoming marriage. He never walked out. What followed was a global scandal. The details were horrifying. Audio recordings from inside the consulate suggested that Khashoggi had been murdered and dismembered by a Saudi hit squad. U.S. intelligence agencies, including the CIA, would later conclude with high confidence that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had ordered the operation. The world reeled. Governments condemned the act. Human rights organizations called for justice. Media outlets splashed gruesome headlines across their front pages. And yet, amid this chaos, Meghan Markle accepted and wore a gift from the man many believed to be directly responsible. It was not just a lapse in judgment. According to insiders, it was a deliberate decision made in the face of repeated warnings. Royal aides reportedly pleaded with Meghan not to wear the earrings. Internal memos described the growing fallout from the Khashoggi killing. Intelligence briefings shared with the palace advised against any appearance of complicity or endorsement. These were not whispers. They were sirens. But they were ignored. One former aide, speaking under condition of anonymity, shared that Meghan was told explicitly that the earrings were from the Saudi crown prince and had been delivered shortly after the journalist's death. The earrings were part of his personal collection, a gesture from one royal to another. The aide recalled Meghan's reaction. She smiled and said something like, "They're beautiful, aren't they?" That was it. No concern, no hesitation. It was chilling. Even more disturbing, the palace made efforts to disguise the origin of the earrings once the backlash began. When questions first arose in the press, official statements described the earrings as having been borrowed. From whom? That was never answered. But it was a lie, an intentional misdirection to shield Meghan from the fallout. When the truth finally came to light through persistent investigative reporting, the damage was already done. The optics were catastrophic. A duchess, married into a family that has long tried to present itself as a symbol of dignity and moral leadership, now stood accused of tacitly endorsing a brutal regime. Meghan's defenders claimed she didn't know, that she couldn't have known. But emails and briefings told a different story. And now, with aides no longer willing to remain silent, that defense is collapsing. Prince Harry, sources say, was deeply disturbed by the revelation. One confidant described him as shattered when he finally grasped the full scope of what had happened. He had reportedly been left in the dark initially, trusting that Meghan was handling the gift according to protocol. But as the press circled and the truth unraveled, Harry found himself cornered, embarrassed, furious, and betrayed. For a man who has often spoken about ethics, justice, and responsibility, the scandal struck a personal nerve. He had walked away from the royal family claiming to seek a more moral, honest life. Yet now he found himself ensnared in a lie that not only tainted his wife's reputation but undermined his own credibility. That moment in which he allegedly referred to Meghan as a liar and a threat was, insiders say, not just about the earrings, but what they symbolized. A betrayal of trust. A willingness to embrace power over principle. The implications go beyond public image. According to royal watchers, this scandal triggered a series of behind-the-scenes consequences within the monarchy. Queen Elizabeth, known for her careful diplomacy, was reportedly appalled. Prince Charles, who had spent decades building delicate ties with Gulf nations, feared a geopolitical fallout. And William, already at odds with Harry over personal and public disputes, was said to be furious over what he saw as yet another example of Meghan's recklessness. But Meghan didn't back down. In the weeks that followed the controversy, she avoided direct comment. Instead, she pivoted. Public appearances were carefully curated. Stories of charity work and motherhood dominated her media coverage. And then came the revelation of her Nigerian ancestry, a sudden and dramatic claim, announced publicly in time suspiciously close to the backlash over the earrings. Critics accused her of using race as a shield, a way to reframe the narrative from scandal to empowerment. That tactic divided opinion. Some praised Meghan's bravery in embracing her roots. Others saw it as manipulation, an attempt to obscure the reality that she had, knowingly or not, worn a symbol of brutality and authoritarianism. The debate raged on, fueled by media outlets, political commentators, and human rights activists. But beneath all the noise, one question remained unanswered. Why? Why, when presented with so much evidence, did Meghan choose to wear those earrings? Was it vanity? Was it ambition? Was it a calculated decision to maintain influence with powerful figures across the globe? Or was it simply arrogance, a belief that she was untouchable, above scrutiny, beyond reproach? This video will explore every layer of this complex and disturbing story. We will hear from insiders who were there when decisions were made. We will examine the geopolitical ramifications of accepting gifts from authoritarian rulers. We will dissect the media response, the public fallout, and the quiet tremors it caused within the royal institution. Most importantly, we will confront the chilling possibility that Meghan Markle, a woman who once positioned herself as a modern, principled royal, may have knowingly lent her name and image to one of the most brutal political murders in recent memory. This is not just a scandal. It is a reckoning. A moment where symbols, silence, and complicity collide. Stay with us as we uncover the darkest secret Meghan tried to keep buried and the devastating impact it has had on the House of Windsor. The package arrived quietly, without fanfare, yet its contents would ripple into a crisis that no amount of public relations gymnastics could suppress. It was discreetly delivered to Kensington Palace just days after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, bearing all the subtle markings of a state-level gift. The note accompanying it was brief, formal, and unmistakably regal. The name at the bottom of the stationery, Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, spoke volumes. Inside the box, nestled in royal velvet, lay a pair of diamond chandelier earrings, breathtakingly opulent and unmistakably expensive. By tradition and protocol, royal gifts, especially those from foreign dignitaries, are recorded meticulously, archived, and in many cases, placed in trust for the monarchy rather than becoming personal property. But what made this gift different, what would later shatter public trust and haunt palace corridors, was not just its stunning value or its source. It was its timing. Delivered mere days after the world learned of Khashoggi's gruesome assassination, the earrings became, in the eyes of many, more than just jewelry. They were symbols of complicity. To understand why this gift was so damning, one must understand the chilling context in which it arrived. On October 2, 2018, Jamal Khashoggi walked into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to retrieve documents for his upcoming marriage. He was never seen again. The initial Saudi narrative claimed he had left the building unharmed. But Turkish authorities soon revealed something far darker. They released chilling audio recordings, later confirmed by multiple intelligence agencies, that indicated Khashoggi had been murdered inside the consulate. The gruesome specifics shocked the world. He was ambushed, suffocated, and dismembered. A team of Saudi operatives had flown into Istanbul just hours earlier, carrying bone saws, and left the country shortly after the murder. Within days, the world turned its gaze to the Saudi crown prince. Intelligence agencies around the world, including the CIA, concluded that Mohammed bin Salman had likely ordered or approved the operation. It wasn't just the brutality that rattled international consciousness. It was the cold, calculated nature of the crime and the blatant attempt at deception that followed. This wasn't a rogue killing. It was a state-sanctioned execution of a dissident. And amid this firestorm, a royal gift quietly found its way into Meghan Markle's possession. Insiders say it was hand-delivered through diplomatic channels, bypassing typical customs checks, and registered with palace clerks. While it was not uncommon for royals to receive luxurious gifts, the origin of this particular present immediately raised alarm bells. Behind the scenes, aides scrambled. Several reportedly advised against accepting the gift at all. One former royal protocol officer described the atmosphere at the time as deeply uneasy. According to that aide, a senior member of staff attempted to return the earrings, only to be told that the gift was intended specifically and personally for the Duchess of Sussex. It was not a generic offering to the institution of the monarchy. It was a token of personal esteem from the Saudi prince to Meghan herself. The timing made this deeply problematic. The world was still reeling from the revelation of Khashoggi's murder. Protests had erupted outside Saudi embassies. Journalists and human rights groups were calling for sanctions. U.S. senators were demanding accountability. Yet within the walls of Kensington Palace, a decision was made that would haunt its occupants. Meghan would keep the earrings and wear them. On October 23, 2018, just 3 weeks after Khashoggi's death, Meghan and Harry attended a lavish state dinner hosted by the president of Fiji. It was their first official royal tour as a married couple. Meghan's appearance was heralded as radiant, regal, and modern. Photographs from the event captured her smiling, glowing, and dressed in a stunning floor-length gown. Hanging from her ears were the Saudi diamonds. At the time, few realized the significance of the jewelry. Photographers noted the earrings' brilliance, fashion critics praised her style, and media outlets gushed over her poise. But within palace walls, there was panic. A small group of staffers knew the truth, and they were horrified. They understood that this was not simply a matter of aesthetics. It was a geopolitical misstep. By publicly wearing those earrings, Meghan had given the appearance of legitimizing a regime under global scrutiny for murder. The internal reaction was swift but fractured. Some tried to suppress the story. Others warned that it would inevitably surface. There was an unspoken code, one aide later told a journalist. We knew we couldn't talk about it publicly, but no one felt good about what happened. Despite their unease, the earrings reappeared on multiple occasions in the months that followed. Each time, the tension within the palace deepened. Staff members questioned the wisdom of allowing Meghan to continue wearing them. Yet there was no intervention. It wasn't until much later, when investigative reporters dug into royal gift records and cross-referenced Meghan's fashion accessories with known diplomatic deliveries, that the full picture emerged. Journalists confirmed that the earrings were a personal gift from the Saudi crown prince and that Meghan had worn them publicly despite widespread knowledge of his role in Khashoggi's killing. The revelation set off a media firestorm. At that point, the palace was cornered. Faced with mounting questions, royal spokespeople issued carefully worded statements. Initially, they claimed the earrings were borrowed, a vague explanation that only intensified the scrutiny. Critics noted that if the earrings were borrowed, the palace should have disclosed the lender. No such information was ever provided. Eventually, under pressure, aides admitted that the earrings were a gift from Saudi Arabia. That admission only raised more questions. Why had the palace lied? Why had Meghan continued to wear them? And most damning of all, what did this say about her judgment? One former intelligence officer who had worked with the British government at the time expressed disbelief. There's no way they didn't know. The entire Western intelligence community had flagged the crown prince. For someone so publicly associated with human rights advocacy to accept and wear those diamonds, well, it sends a message. And not a good one. Some suggested that Meghan may have underestimated the significance. that she viewed the earrings as just another glamorous accessory in her wardrobe. But insiders dispute that narrative. They describe Meghan as highly media-savvy, acutely aware of optics, and deeply involved in her own image management. She reportedly approved every outfit, every accessory, every public appearance with precision. This wasn't a mistake, one palace insider claimed. This was a choice. What made the situation worse was the apparent lack of accountability. No apology was issued. No statement of regret was made. Meghan never addressed the controversy directly. Instead, her team deflected attention with stories about her humanitarian work, motherhood, and public service. The earrings quietly disappeared from her wardrobe, but the damage was done. The public reaction was divided. Some were outraged, calling for the earrings to be returned and for Meghan to make a formal apology. Human rights groups condemned the act, labeling it a silent endorsement of tyranny. Others, mostly loyal supporters of the Sussexes, dismissed the backlash as overblown or politically motivated. But within the royal household, the scandal left scars. Staffers who had warned against accepting the gift reportedly felt vindicated but bitter. Their concerns had been ignored, their professional judgments overridden. Morale suffered. Several aides left their positions in the months that followed. Among them were individuals who had worked closely with Meghan and Harry, once trusted confidants who now felt disillusioned and disrespected. This single pair of earrings had become a flashpoint. They represented not just a lapse in protocol, but a deeper flaw in judgment and ethics. A symbol of how far removed the Sussexes had become from the values they claimed to champion. In the eyes of many, Meghan's decision to wear those earrings was not just a fashion statement, it was a moral failure. And for Harry, it marked the beginning of a personal crisis. The man who had championed mental health, fought for justice, and walked away from royal privilege in search of purpose now found himself defending the indefensible. As the scandal grew, Harry reportedly grew distant and withdrawn. Sources say he confronted Meghan about the earrings, demanding to know why she had worn them. Her answers, insiders suggest, did not satisfy him. What began as a glittering accessory soon became a weight around both their necks, a shimmering reminder of the choices that define character, the silence that speaks volumes, and the truth that, no matter how hard one tries to hide it, always finds its way to the surface. Before Jamal Khashoggi's name became synonymous with one of the most brutal state-sanctioned assassinations of the 21st century, he was a man of quiet conviction. A journalist, thinker, and critic, Khashoggi was not a revolutionary by nature. He did not call for the violent overthrow of regimes or incite radical change. Instead, he used his words. With the weight of a pen and the force of reason, he challenged the unchecked power of one of the world's richest and most secretive monarchies, his own homeland, Saudi Arabia. Born in Medina in 1958, Khashoggi belonged to a prominent family with deep ties to the Saudi elite. His grandfather was the personal physician to King Abdulaziz, the founder of modern Saudi Arabia. His cousin, Adnan Khashoggi, was a famed arms dealer whose name echoed through Cold War scandals. Jamal himself was well educated, having studied journalism at Indiana State University. He returned to Saudi Arabia a man deeply committed to the principles of truth and reform, even as those ideals placed him at increasing odds with the state. Khashoggi's journalism career took him across the Middle East. He covered the Soviet war in Afghanistan, interviewed Osama bin Laden in the 1980s, and became editor-in-chief of Al Watan, one of Saudi Arabia's most prominent newspapers. Under his leadership, Al Watan published articles that challenged religious extremism and called for political reform. But that outspokenness came at a cost. In 2003, he was dismissed from his editorial position under pressure from religious authorities and hardliners in the royal family. By 2018, he had become a thorn in the crown prince's side. Exiled in the United States, Khashoggi continued to write. His pen became his sword, but he never imagined it would lead to his death. On October 2, 2018, he entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to obtain documents for his forthcoming marriage to Turkish fiancée Hatice Cengiz. What happened next would send shockwaves around the globe. According to Turkish intelligence, a 15-member Saudi hit squad had arrived in Istanbul hours earlier on private jets. They were equipped with medical tools, including a bone saw. Their mission, Turkish officials later revealed, was to kill and dispose of Khashoggi's body without a trace. Inside the consulate, audio recordings allegedly captured his final moments, pleading, struggling, and ultimately being murdered. His body was never recovered. The initial Saudi response was denial. Officials claimed Khashoggi had left the building unharmed. But within days, mounting evidence made the lie impossible to maintain. Turkish investigators released surveillance footage, airport records, and damning audio tapes. The Saudis shifted their story, first saying Khashoggi had died in a fistfight, then claiming a rogue operation had gone awry. But no one was buying it. The international community demanded answers. The United Nations launched an investigation. Governments around the world issued statements of condemnation. It was the CIA's assessment, however, that sent the clearest message. In November 2018, the agency concluded with high confidence that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had personally ordered the killing. The findings were based on intercepts of communications, intelligence sources, and the nature of the operation itself, far too complex and sensitive to have occurred without the prince's approval. Yet despite the gravity of the crime, the geopolitical response was tepid. Saudi Arabia, as the world's largest oil exporter and a major purchaser of Western arms, maintained its strategic importance. The Trump administration, while publicly condemning the murder, refused to directly implicate MBS. The calculus was clear: outrage would not trump oil and arms deals. Still, in the court of public opinion, MBS's image took a dramatic hit. Human rights organizations labeled him a dictator. Protests erupted in major cities. The Washington Post, in a full-page editorial, vowed to honor Khashoggi's legacy by continuing the fight for press freedom. Hadissi Cengiz, devastated and defiant, became a vocal advocate for justice, appearing before the United Nations and testifying to the U.S. Congress. It was within this intense and emotionally charged context that Meghan Markle accepted and wore the earrings gifted by the man now widely recognized as a murderer. The juxtaposition was staggering. Here was a duchess, a member of the British royal family, hailed for her advocacy for women's rights, racial justice, and humanitarian work, wearing a glittering symbol of the very regime responsible for executing a dissident journalist. This act was not interpreted merely as a lapse in decorum. For many, it was a betrayal. Journalists, activists, and critics argued that by wearing the earrings, Meghan had lent her legitimacy, her carefully curated image as a modern moral leader, to a regime that thrived on suppression and fear. What stung even more was the silence. Meghan never addressed the controversy. The palace initially tried to obfuscate. When questions mounted, they offered weak justifications. But the public memory of Khashoggi's killing was too fresh, too vivid to be buried under royal distractions. Khashoggi's death remains one of the most disturbing acts of political violence in recent history. Not simply because of the brutality involved, but because of what it revealed about the global tolerance for authoritarian impunity. A journalist murdered on foreign soil. A state-sponsored hit carried out in a diplomatic building. A body dismembered and vanished. And the man behind it, far from being punished, was still shaking hands with world leaders, attending economic summits, and gifting diamonds to duchesses. For Meghan Markle to have placed those diamonds on her ears, knowingly or not, was to place herself, however briefly, on the wrong side of history. In doing so, she didn't just tarnish her reputation. She desecrated the memory of a man whose only crime was to tell the truth. And now, as the world re-examines the symbols and choices that define our leaders, the image of those earrings will not be forgotten. Not just for their brilliance, but for the shadow they cast, one shaped by murder, betrayal, and the haunting echo of a journalist's final breath. The British royal family is not merely a group of public figures. It is an institution bound by centuries of tradition, diplomacy, and rigorous protocols designed to protect both the monarchy and the public it represents. Among these protocols, few are more critical and more sensitive than the handling of gifts from foreign dignitaries. Gifts are not just tokens of goodwill. They are political statements, gestures that can be loaded with meaning, influence, and sometimes, as in Meghan Markle's case, moral controversy. Understanding how royal gift protocol operates is essential to grasp the magnitude of Meghan's misstep with the diamond earrings from Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The rules are not ambiguous. They are clear, thorough, and reinforced by teams of legal and diplomatic advisors. When foreign gifts arrive, especially those from regimes with problematic human rights records, they are scrutinized not only for their value, but for their implications. Every item, from ceremonial swords to luxury accessories, is documented in what is known as the Royal Gift Register. This record includes the date received, the identity of the giver, a description of the item, and its appraised value. If the gift exceeds a modest price threshold or is deemed a personal luxury rather than an institutional artifact, it becomes the property of the crown, not the individual. In essence, such gifts are held in trust by the monarchy and must be treated with diplomatic caution. It is exceedingly rare for members of the royal family to use or wear these items for personal enjoyment, particularly in a public setting. Yet in Meghan's case, those protocols were not followed. The earrings, which arrived just days after Jamal Khashoggi's brutal assassination, were not relegated to a secure vault or sent back with a polite diplomatic note. They were worn, in full public view, during high-profile royal engagements. This wasn't just a breach of etiquette. It was a violation of the moral restraint that underpins royal diplomacy. The question is why? Why were the earrings not rejected, returned, or quietly shelved? Why did Meghan Markle, a woman whose entire royal narrative revolved around modernity, justice, and principled leadership, decide to wear a gift from one of the most criticized regimes on earth, and at such a politically explosive time? Insiders offer several explanations, none of which absolve the seriousness of the error. Some former aides claim Meghan simply ignored protocol, that she treated the earrings as a personal gift and did not run the decision through the usual advisory channels. One former royal protocol officer, who worked during the Sussexes' tenure, told reporters that Meghan often clashed with staff over the formalities of royal life. She saw herself as a global celebrity, not just a duchess. That made her impatient with procedures. In her mind, she didn't need permission to wear anything. Other sources suggest that the earrings were discussed behind closed doors and that Meghan was advised, possibly even warned, not to wear them. If true, it would suggest a far more disturbing possibility, that she knowingly defied both protocol and good sense. According to these sources, multiple advisors flagged the gift due to its origin and timing, especially given the swirling international outrage over the Khashoggi killing. But those warnings were either dismissed or ignored. A third possibility, one that paints an even murkier picture, involves internal miscommunication and the palace's own attempts at damage control. After the public began to question the provenance of the earrings, official royal spokespeople released a misleading statement claiming the earrings were borrowed. That vague word was never clarified. Borrowed from whom? Another royal family? A private collection? A state archive? No answers were provided. This lack of transparency only deepened the public's suspicion. Behind the scenes, however, the full story began to emerge. According to reports compiled by investigative journalists, the earrings were delivered directly from the Saudi royal household. They were not alone. They were a gift, accompanied by diplomatic credentials and identified as part of the crown prince's personal collection. In any other administration or monarchy, such a gift, especially one of that value and from such a controversial source, would have triggered an immediate response. It would have been flagged, logged, and likely returned. That didn't happen here. And the reason why still eludes definitive explanation. Part of the challenge lies in Meghan's hybrid identity within the royal family. Unlike traditional royals raised within the institution, Meghan entered the monarchy as an outsider, a Hollywood actress with a different worldview and an emphasis on self-branding. While this brought a fresh perspective to a centuries-old institution, it also created friction. Meghan's approach to public appearances was often rooted in celebrity culture, an arena where wearing luxury items from powerful people is a symbol of status and influence, not a diplomatic liability. This tension between celebrity culture and royal protocol came to a head with the Saudi earrings. In Hollywood, a glamorous pair of diamond earrings might be a mere fashion statement. In Buckingham Palace, they are loaded with symbolism. They represent a relationship, a history, and, in this case, a grotesque act of violence. By choosing to wear them, Meghan blurred the line between personal glamour and political consequence. There is also the matter of precedent. Other members of the royal family have received controversial gifts in the past, but rarely, if ever, have they chosen to parade those items in public. When Queen Elizabeth received a golden dagger from an African dictator in the 1980s, it was quietly placed in a private collection and never mentioned again. When Prince Charles was offered an extravagant stallion by the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, he thanked the Libyan government politely and arranged for the animal to be rehomed to a non-royal facility. The key difference in those instances was discretion. The royals understood the optics. They understood that gifts from authoritarian regimes come with strings attached, even if only symbolic ones. Meghan, however, either did not understand or did not care. And that indifference, or defiance, exposed a dangerous flaw in the monarchy's handling of modern image management. The palace's failure to enforce its own rules also deserves scrutiny. After the initial outcry, rather than issuing a formal correction or apology, the palace appeared to close ranks around Meghan. The misleading statement about the earrings being borrowed was never corrected. No disciplinary action was taken. No staff member was authorized to speak on record about what had happened. That silence bred speculation and eventually dissent. A number of royal aides reportedly resigned in the months following the controversy. Some cited Meghan's management style and the overall chaos of the Sussex household. But insiders also point to this specific scandal as a turning point. For those who believed in the dignity of the institution, the fact that a member of the royal family could wear a gift from a known human rights abuser, lie about its origin, and face no consequences was a betrayal of everything the monarchy was supposed to stand for. The long-term damage from this breach of protocol is difficult to quantify. In diplomatic circles, it was seen as a lapse in judgment that undermined the moral authority of the British monarchy. Among human rights organizations, it was viewed as a disgraceful capitulation to soft power from the Gulf. And among ordinary citizens, it was a moment of disillusionment, a realization that even the royals were not immune to the seduction of wealth and prestige. Ultimately, the question is not just about one pair of earrings. It is about the role of the monarchy in a modern world fraught with ethical dilemmas and political landmines. It is about whether royal figures are still capable of navigating those challenges with the integrity the institution demands. Meghan's decision and the palace's response suggest a troubling answer. Inside the royal household, silence is sacred. Confidentiality isn't just expected, it's demanded. For decades, palace aides have carried the burden of discretion like armor, sworn to secrecy even in the most turbulent storms of scandal. But occasionally, the silence fractures. When the stakes are high enough, when the truth becomes too heavy to hide, that code breaks. And in the wake of Meghan Markle's decision to wear the infamous diamond earrings gifted by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, just weeks after the brutal murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, cracks have split open inside the palace. Those who were once bound by loyalty have begun to speak. Their testimonies paint a damning picture, not just of reckless decision-making, but of deliberate indifference. These were not minor miscommunications or innocent oversights. According to former aides, Meghan was informed, clearly, repeatedly, and through multiple channels, that the earrings were a gift from the man widely believed to have ordered a political assassination. And she wore them anyway. The first red flag, one former senior aide revealed, was raised before the earrings even reached Meghan's dressing room. We received word that a diplomatic gift was en route, coming from Saudi Arabia, specifically from the Crown Prince, the aide explained. Given what had just happened with Khashoggi, our team was on high alert. This wasn't just another jewel box, it was a political grenade. A junior staffer assigned to cataloging royal gifts was reportedly the first to voice concern. After opening the velvet-lined box and confirming the provenance, they consulted with the head of royal protocol. The instruction from protocol was clear, the source said. Flag it, document it, and advise the Duchess not to wear it publicly. The communication was formalized in an internal memo reviewed by senior Kensington Palace staff. That memo included a summary of the political risk, media sensitivity, and a direct recommendation to avoid public display of the earrings. That memo, aides say, was delivered to Meghan's private secretary and discussed in a closed-door meeting shortly before the Fijian state dinner where the earrings made their debut. Multiple aides confirmed that Meghan was present for that meeting. She knew, a former communications advisor stated unequivocally. There was no ambiguity. The memo spelled out the origin. We explained that this was not a standard state gift. It was from the personal collection of the Crown Prince, and given the ongoing investigations into Khashoggi's murder, wearing it would be seen as a silent endorsement of his regime. Another aide recounted Meghan's reaction. She shrugged, the staffer said. She said something like, "It's just jewelry. No one will care." That reaction stunned the room. We tried to impress upon her the gravity of the situation. This wasn't a debate about color matching or event styling, it was about human rights. But she brushed it off. There were even suggestions made to replace the earrings at the last minute. Alternative jewelry options were presented. But according to staff who were in the dressing suite that evening, Meghan insisted on the Saudi diamonds. She said they completed the look, one stylist recalled, and she didn't want to hear another word about it. What followed was a moment of near paralysis within the palace. The communications team debated whether to alert the press in advance, to prepare a preemptive statement, or to discourage photographers from zooming in on the earrings. But no consensus was reached. The event went ahead. Meghan appeared in her custom gown, radiant, confident, and wearing the earrings. When images from the Fijian state dinner surfaced in the media, the press initially focused on her appearance. But within days, eagle-eyed royal watchers and fashion analysts began asking questions. Where were the earrings from? Had they been worn before? Who designed them? When reports emerged suggesting a Saudi origin, the palace scrambled to contain the fallout. An emergency meeting was held the following morning. According to internal sources, panic had gripped the Kensington Communications office. We were flooded with calls, a press officer recounted. Reporters had questions we couldn't answer, or weren't allowed to answer. The decision was made to issue a vague statement. The earrings had been borrowed. That was the beginning of the cover-up, said a former aide who resigned several months later. We all knew it wasn't true. They weren't borrowed. They were gifted by the Saudis. And by trying to hide that, we made it worse. Over the next several weeks, the controversy simmered. International news outlets picked up the story. Human rights activists condemned the optics. But within the palace, the divide only grew deeper. Several aides reportedly threatened to resign. We didn't sign up to launder political reputations, one said. We serve the monarchy, not foreign tyrants. The situation escalated further when a senior intelligence liaison contacted the palace to reiterate the risk associated with accepting gifts from hostile or repressive regimes. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, they warned, had become a political pariah in many parts of the world. For a member of the British royal family to be seen wearing a personal gift from him could be interpreted as complicity. Meghan's defenders inside the palace tried to spin a different narrative. They claimed she had been misled, that she wasn't properly briefed. But those claims crumbled quickly under scrutiny. Multiple staff members had documented the warning process. Emails existed. Memos were archived. And witnesses remembered every conversation. The growing sense of betrayal was not limited to junior staff. According to sources, even Prince Harry was kept in the dark about the earrings' origins until after the backlash began. When he discovered the truth, his reaction was reportedly one of anger and confusion. He felt blindsided, one aide said. He demanded to know why he hadn't been told, and why Meghan hadn't told him. The breakdown in trust between Meghan and her aides, and between Meghan and Harry, began to take a more permanent shape. Internal dynamics shifted. Staff who had once defended her began to distance themselves. Whisper networks formed within royal departments, sharing frustrations and warning newcomers to tread carefully. One former aide, who had worked with the Sussexes from the early days of their marriage, described the earrings incident as the final straw. They had grown increasingly concerned about what they saw as a pattern of reckless behavior and disregard for institutional norms. The earrings weren't the only issue, the aide explained. But they symbolized a larger problem, a belief that rules didn't apply to her. Others pointed to a sense of entitlement that had crept into Meghan's decision-making process. She didn't see herself as part of the royal system, one palace advisor said. She saw herself as above it. And that's dangerous, especially when you're dealing with international diplomacy. The scandal surrounding the earrings left long-lasting damage. In the weeks that followed, multiple aides filed formal complaints, not just about the earrings, but about the broader working environment. Some cited bullying, manipulation, and a culture of fear. The palace launched an internal review, but the findings were never made public. In private, aides expressed deep frustration at the lack of accountability. We raised every alarm, one senior figure said. We followed every protocol, and we were ignored. Their testimony, though never officially acknowledged by the palace, now forms the backbone of what is becoming a historic moment in royal controversy. The fact that these testimonies are emerging at all speaks volumes. Palace aides almost never go on the record. Their silence is their job. For them to break it, even anonymously, is a sign of the depth of discontent and the seriousness of the betrayal they felt. What makes their stories so compelling is not just their consistency, but their humanity. These were not faceless bureaucrats. They were individuals, professionals who had dedicated their lives to an institution they believed in. And they watched, helpless, as one of its newest and most celebrated members threw away the trust they had placed in her. As more aides come forward, their voices converge around a single, damning conclusion. Meghan Markle knew exactly what she was doing. She was informed. She was warned. And she chose to wear the earrings anyway. That decision, made in a moment of vanity or defiance, now haunts the very image she once worked so hard to construct. On October 23, 2018, Meghan Markle stepped out onto the red carpet of a Fijian state dinner with poise and a polished smile. Her custom gown by British designer Sophia shimmered under the bright chandeliers of the Grand Pacific Hotel in Suva. Standing beside her was Prince Harry, dressed in military regalia, exuding confidence. But it wasn't her dress or Harry's medals that would later dominate global headlines. It was the sparkle dangling from Meghan's ears, the now infamous diamond earrings, a gift from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. At the time, only a handful of people within the palace knew their provenance. To the public, they were simply stunning. To the aides, they were radioactive. That evening marked the first known public occasion Meghan wore the earrings, but it would not be the last. Nor would it be the only time their presence cast a chilling contrast to the context in which they were worn. The significance of the Fiji state dinner cannot be overstated. It wasn't a private event or casual appearance. It was a televised, high-level diplomatic event, with press from all over the Commonwealth in attendance. Meghan's appearance was front-page news across Australia, the UK, and North America. She delivered a speech emphasizing women's empowerment and the importance of education. Cameras flashed, journalists typed rapidly, and no one, at least initially, questioned the diamonds that sparkled as she gestured passionately at the podium. But to those watching closely from the sidelines, intelligence operatives, royal staff, and foreign diplomats, there was unease. The date of the event fell just 21 days after Jamal Khashoggi's murder. 3 weeks earlier, the world had learned of a journalist being lured into a consulate, murdered, and dismembered. 3 weeks was not enough time for wounds to heal. And yet, here was the Duchess of Sussex, standing in front of global cameras, wearing a gift from the man widely blamed for that crime. Publicly, there was silence. The palace issued no statement on the earrings. But privately, diplomatic observers began whispering. Foreign ministry officials from New Zealand and Australia, both Commonwealth allies, reportedly expressed concern about the optics. One Fijian official described the mood among certain government staffers as tense confusion, uncertain whether the jewelry had political implications or was a fashion coincidence. The second confirmed instance of Meghan wearing the earrings occurred in Tonga, the next stop on the royal tour. On October 25, 2018, Meghan attended a lavish evening reception hosted by King Tupou VI and Queen Nanasapayu. Again, she dazzled in a floor-length evening gown, her hair elegantly swept back, drawing even more attention to the earrings that glinted beneath the ballroom lights. This time, the earrings did not go unnoticed. A royal photographer on assignment for a UK outlet zoomed in, identifying them as the same pair from Fiji. Questions began trickling in. Where were they from? Were they on loan? Had they been gifted? The palace's press office deflected inquiries with tight-lipped brevity. One fashion blog speculated they were bespoke, possibly from a high-end Middle Eastern jeweler. But by then, investigative journalists had started digging. Back in London, whispers turned to murmurs. Newsrooms were cross-referencing royal gift registries, calling luxury jewelry experts, and speaking with Middle East correspondents. The first true warning shot came from a well-respected political columnist who posted a now-deleted tweet. Who gave Meghan those earrings she wore in Fiji and Tonga? Might not be as innocent as it looks. Meanwhile, Meghan's schedule continued. The earrings made a third appearance during a private dinner in London the following month. Though this event was not widely covered by the media, a leaked photograph surfaced on social media showing Meghan with high-profile guests from the charity sector. The earrings were unmistakable. The image spread quickly, and within hours, questions about their origin gained new urgency. It was at this point that the story began to fracture the public narrative. Meghan had positioned herself as a socially conscious humanitarian. She spoke of justice, fairness, women's rights, and media integrity. But those earrings told a different story, one of deliberate alignment with a regime whose most recent act had been to silence a journalist through violent means. The earrings weren't just diamonds anymore. They were a statement. And whether intentional or not, they now represented a silent nod to power, a disregard for timing, and a blind spot in the otherwise tightly curated image Meghan had worked so hard to project. The fourth and most controversial appearance of the earrings was during a reception in London attended by several journalists and Middle Eastern dignitaries. Meghan wore a black fitted dress, simple and elegant, allowing the earrings to once again take center stage. A guest at the event, speaking under anonymity, said the irony was unbearable. She gave a speech about media freedom and protecting whistleblowers, the guest said, while wearing earrings from a man accused of orchestrating the killing of a journalist. It was surreal. The controversy gained serious traction in the media soon after. A prominent UK newspaper broke the story, revealing that the earrings were a gift from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and had been delivered shortly after Khashoggi's murder. The reaction was swift and brutal. Human rights activists demanded accountability. Opinion columns accused Meghan of hypocrisy. Royal commentators expressed disbelief. Even some of Meghan's allies in the media found it difficult to justify her actions. The palace, under pressure, finally issued its vague statement. The earrings were borrowed, but they offered no source, no date, no further clarification. The lie quickly unraveled. Multiple insiders confirmed the earrings were indeed a diplomatic gift from the Saudi royal family. Meghan had not only accepted them, but had chosen to wear them to at least 4 high-profile events in the span of a few weeks. It wasn't just that Meghan wore the earrings, it was where and when she wore them. Each occasion was deeply symbolic. The Fiji state dinner was a celebration of Commonwealth values, including freedom and democratic cooperation. Tonga was a reaffirmation of Britain's partnership with small, sovereign nations. The London charity dinner highlighted the importance of transparency. And the journalist reception, perhaps the most glaring, was literally focused on defending press freedoms. These weren't private events. They were chosen platforms, with cameras, statements, and speeches. And every flashbulb that captured the glint of those diamonds served as an unspoken contradiction to the words being delivered. While Meghan talked about fairness and justice, the jewelry on her ears whispered a darker truth. It's important to note that each of these events was tightly scripted. The royal family's appearances are not spontaneous affairs. Every outfit is planned, every accessory vetted, every setting curated for maximum diplomacy. Meghan was no exception. Despite being new to the institution, she was known for being hands-on. Insiders revealed she often selected her own jewelry, approved her look, and was deeply involved in how she was presented. This makes the recurring choice to wear the earrings all the more damning. It wasn't a one-off mistake. It was a pattern, a repeated defiance or indifference to the warnings and the growing backlash. The earrings have since disappeared from public view. They have not been seen again on Meghan at any event. Rumors persist that they've been placed into private storage. Others claim they were returned to Saudi officials quietly in the months that followed. The palace has never clarified their final destination, but the damage had already been done. Every time Meghan wore those earrings, she reignited the memory of a man who died for speaking truth. Jamal Khashoggi's face appeared in countless headlines beside images of Meghan smiling at banquets and speaking at lecterns. His brutal end became intertwined with her dazzling displays, and for many, that association remains indelible. What should have been simple public appearances became historical footnotes in a growing scandal. The question is no longer whether Meghan wore the earrings, but why she wore them, and what each appearance says about the choices she made while the world watched. Prince Harry had always been the royal rebel. Impulsive, emotional, quick to defend the people he loved. But when it came to matters of conscience and injustice, his instincts were often grounded in a deep, almost painful sense of moral clarity. From his military service to his outspoken stance on mental health, Harry had repeatedly shown that he was unafraid to take bold positions. Yet behind the walls of Kensington Palace, during the weeks and months that followed the Saudi earring scandal, he was a man frozen in internal conflict, conflicted, silenced, and increasingly isolated. At first, Harry didn't know. That was the most painful part, according to those who were close to him. The decision to wear the earrings had been made in Meghan's private circle, styling assistants, aides, and Meghan herself. The diamond earrings were handed to Meghan with little discussion between her and Harry, and she presented them as part of her wardrobe like any other accessory. At the time of the Fijian dinner, Harry's focus had been elsewhere. On the tour, the speeches, the optics of their first major diplomatic trip as a married couple. It was a whirlwind of appearances and symbolism, and he trusted that the details had been handled properly. But that trust would soon break. According to a senior aide, it wasn't until the media storm began that Harry fully grasped the origin of the earrings. He had assumed, mistakenly, that they were on loan from a known royal collection or that their origin had been cleared through official channels. When news broke that they were a personal gift from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Harry was blindsided. He confronted Meghan in private, according to multiple palace insiders. One conversation, in particular, stands out. It took place in a private room at Frogmore Cottage late one evening, shortly after the story had gained international traction. The discussion began with concern but quickly escalated. Harry, already under pressure from mounting tabloid scrutiny, felt humiliated. Not only had Meghan worn earrings linked to one of the most controversial figures in the world, but the palace had also been caught lying to protect her. Insiders report that Harry's tone was not explosive but desperate. He repeatedly asked one question, "Did you know?" Meghan's response, reportedly evasive, only deepened his panic. She downplayed the situation, suggesting she had been misinformed or that the warnings had been unclear. But Harry, known for his gut instincts, wasn't convinced. According to one aide who spoke with him days later, Harry said quietly, "She knew. She had to have known. And now I'm the one paying for it." From that moment on, Harry's behavior changed. Publicly, he continued to support Meghan, appearing beside her at events, defending her in interviews. But privately, he began to withdraw. Staff members noticed his demeanor shift. He was more guarded, less talkative, often retreating to his office alone. The trust that had once underpinned his relationship with his wife and with his advisors was slowly eroding. Palace insiders began referring to this period as Harry's silent panic. He wasn't outwardly angry, but he was clearly tormented. The very institutions he had once trusted, the palace's communication team, the protocol office, even his own household, had all failed to prevent a scandal that now bore his name as much as Meghan's. Worse, his credibility as a moral figure, as someone who had positioned himself against injustice and authoritarianism, was now under attack. Harry's distress was compounded by the reaction from his family. Prince William, who had already grown distant from Harry in the wake of Meghan's entry into the royal fold, was reportedly furious. William, who had worked closely with Middle Eastern partners through his own royal engagements, understood the geopolitical ramifications of the scandal. His reaction was described by one aide as cold and absolute. There was no attempt at brotherly reassurance. Instead, William reportedly told a close staffer, "He's made his choice. Let him deal with it." Charles, too, was livid. The Prince of Wales had spent years fostering delicate diplomatic ties with Saudi Arabia, balancing trade, environmental advocacy, and royal etiquette. The earrings incident, in his view, was not just a PR disaster, it was a diplomatic insult. According to a courtier close to Charles, the future king issued a terse warning to Harry through a senior private secretary, "Get control of the situation, or we will." Queen Elizabeth, though characteristically silent in public, was privately shaken. The monarch had always viewed royal diplomacy as a sacred duty. The symbolism of a royal wearing a gift from a man linked to the murder of a journalist was, to her, intolerable. Though she did not intervene directly, her disappointment was reportedly made known through trusted channels. Harry was cornered. He had no allies left within the palace hierarchy. His wife was at the center of an international scandal, his brother had turned his back, and his father's patience had worn thin. And all of this was happening while Meghan continued to present a serene, defiant front to the world. In public, she smiled. She gave speeches. She attended charity events. She leaned into the narrative of victimhood, portraying herself as the target of racism, misogyny, and institutional cruelty. But behind closed doors, those who worked with Harry said he was unraveling. He began skipping internal briefings. He declined to attend meetings about their joint engagements. He delegated more responsibilities to staff, distancing himself from decision-making. At one point, according to a former press aide, Harry considered issuing his own personal statement about the earrings. He wanted to clarify that he had not been aware of their origin and that he regretted the optics. But the palace vetoed the idea. It would only make things worse, his advisors argued. It would pit you against your wife, and the press would devour that. Harry acquiesced. But the damage was done. Within weeks, tensions reached a boiling point inside the Sussex household. Several staffers resigned. Others requested transfers. One long-serving aide described the environment as toxic beyond repair. The earrings scandal, though not the sole reason for the disintegration, had acted as a catalyst. It exposed deep fractures in the couple's relationship, not just with the royal family, but with each other. What haunted Harry most, insiders say, was the sense of betrayal. He had trusted Meghan to represent their shared values, to uphold the integrity they had promised to champion together. Instead, he found himself defending decisions he didn't make, protecting actions he didn't condone, and covering up truths he didn't believe in. His panic wasn't just about the headlines. It was about the realization that the woman he had sacrificed everything for, his titles, his homeland, his family, might not share the same moral compass. For Harry, who had long felt like an outsider within his own family, Meghan had been his sanctuary. The earrings incident shattered that illusion. In the months that followed, Harry grew increasingly withdrawn from royal life. He avoided family gatherings. He minimized contact with palace advisors. And, according to those closest to him, he began to question everything from the media deals they were pursuing, to the activism they were fronting, to the values they claimed to stand for. The internal crisis eventually became unsustainable. By early 2019, whispers of a permanent departure from royal duties had begun circulating. The earrings scandal didn't start the fire, but it added gasoline. It exposed the irreconcilable differences between Harry's public identity and the reality of his marriage. And in the privacy of Frogmore Cottage, the prince who had once stood so tall began to question whether he had made the biggest mistake of his life. For weeks, the earrings sparkled quietly in the background of Meghan Markle's public appearances, unnoticed by the wider public, unremarked upon by fashion outlets beyond routine praise. But in the digital age, no detail remains hidden for long. What began as a whisper in exclusive circles of royal observers soon exploded into a full-blown media firestorm, one that would leave scorched reputations, fractured alliances, and unanswered questions smoldering across newsrooms and social media platforms worldwide. The initial crack in the silence came from an unexpected source, a veteran royal photographer who had covered the Fiji leg of the Duke and Duchess of Sussexes tour. In an off-the-record conversation with a fashion journalist, the photographer commented casually that the earrings Meghan wore to the Fijian state dinner were too high value to be personal pieces. That comment, almost a throwaway observation, sparked curiosity. Where were the earrings from? Were they part of a royal archive? Were they on loan from a luxury designer? A freelance fashion analyst, intrigued by the remark, began to dig. Using high-resolution photos from multiple angles, she noted the earrings matched known pieces in Meghan's previous wardrobe. Cross-referencing their design against global luxury catalogs, she stumbled across a shocking match, an extremely rare diamond cut previously displayed by a jeweler based in the Gulf region, one known to work with members of the Saudi royal family. Within days, rumors began circulating in online royal forums and Twitter circles dedicated to fashion sleuthing. Still, nothing concrete had been published. That changed when a major British newspaper launched an internal investigation. The royal correspondent, tipped off by whispers from palace staff, made a series of discreet inquiries. A source close to Kensington Palace confirmed under strict anonymity that the earrings had not come from the Queen's private collection or any royal jeweler. Then, the breakthrough. Documents surfaced, leaked by a former staff member, confirming that the earrings had been received as a diplomatic gift from the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, mere days after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. The documents listed the date of receipt, the nature of the gift, and the sender. They even included notes from protocol officers warning of the political risks of displaying the item in public. The article that followed was nothing short of explosive. Headlined across multiple countries as Meghan's blood diamond, earrings linked to Khashoggi murder, it unleashed a firestorm. The piece detailed the provenance of the gift, the date of delivery, and the fact that Meghan had worn them to at least 2 major public events despite internal warnings. Readers around the world were stunned. The optics were horrifying. A duchess, champion of human rights and media freedom, adorned in jewels gifted by a man accused of one of the most heinous political assassinations in modern memory. Within hours of publication, the article trended on every major platform. Twitter was ablaze with hashtags like #BloodDiamonds, #Khashoggi earrings, and #Meghan scandal. Activists, journalists, and celebrities weighed in. Amnesty International issued a statement calling the revelation deeply troubling and symbolic of the West's ongoing failure to hold powerful regimes accountable. Journalists from around the world reposted side-by-side images of Meghan smiling at diplomatic functions and Jamal Khashoggi's face, often captioning them with phrases like "she knew" or "justice has a price." Television news anchors interrupted programming to cover the unfolding scandal. International news agencies dispatched reporters to Windsor, to Buckingham Palace, into Riyadh. The Saudis, for their part, remained silent, choosing not to respond to the controversy publicly. But in London, the palace was thrown into crisis mode. The first response from the royal press office was a single sentence: the earrings were borrowed. That vague explanation only worsened the situation. Borrowed from whom? When? Under what conditions? Reporters bombarded palace communications staff with follow-up questions, but no answers were forthcoming. The ambiguity fueled further speculation. Editorials accused the palace of lying, of attempting to protect Meghan at the expense of transparency. Within 48 hours, additional sources emerged: former aides, stylists, and protocol officers who could no longer tolerate the official narrative. One such aide provided a chilling quote to an American outlet: "We told her. Multiple times. She wore them anyway." The public mood shifted rapidly. Prior defenders of Meghan began to question her integrity. Op-eds from liberal publications, which had once championed her as a feminist icon unfairly maligned by the British press, now carried titles like "When Silence Speaks Louder Than Words" and "The Duchess and the Diamond Dilemma." Conservative outlets, already critical of the Sussexes, launched a relentless attack, accusing Meghan of political hypocrisy, arrogance, and using humanitarian causes as a PR shield while privately embracing power and luxury without consequence. Commentators across the spectrum agreed on one thing: the earrings were not just jewelry, they were a statement. Whether intentional or not, they represented an alignment with a man condemned across the world for ordering a journalist's brutal execution. Public outrage was not limited to the press. Petitions were launched demanding an official apology. One petition, titled "Return the Earrings, Respect Khashoggi," gathered over 100,000 signatures in just 3 days. Letters were sent to members of Parliament urging a review of royal gift protocols. Members of the House of Lords discussed the scandal during a session on UK-Saudi relations, with one peer describing Meghan's decision as profoundly damaging to Britain's diplomatic reputation. Within the royal household, panic turned to fury. Queen Elizabeth, while not commenting publicly, was said to be gravely disappointed. Prince Charles, who had long maintained sensitive economic ties with the Gulf states, feared the scandal would disrupt years of diplomatic work. He reportedly told a close confidant, "This is exactly the kind of disaster we're trained to avoid. It's beyond reckless." Prince William, already estranged from Harry, was livid. He refused to take Harry's calls in the days that followed, and is believed to have privately supported a stricter gift policy being discussed by royal advisors in the wake of the scandal. His concern was not merely institutional, it was personal. William had hosted events focused on media freedom and had honored journalists persecuted in autocratic regimes. For Meghan to wear those earrings while representing the monarchy undermined the credibility of every statement William had ever made. Harry, caught in the eye of the storm, was said to be distraught. His emotional unraveling, already well underway after discovering the earrings' origin, accelerated under the pressure of the media onslaught. Reports emerged that he had withdrawn from several planned engagements, citing personal matters. Sources within the Sussex camp hinted at growing tension between him and Meghan, particularly over how the scandal was being handled, or, in his view, mishandled. Meghan, for her part, refused to issue a personal statement. Her legal team advised against it, fearing that any admission of guilt could open the door to further legal scrutiny or diplomatic backlash. Instead, her camp doubled down on the narrative that she was unaware of the earrings' origin at the time she wore them, an assertion now widely disputed. The media pressure only intensified as new information emerged. One foreign diplomat leaked a classified summary of a British intelligence briefing that had been shared with the palace before the Fiji tour. The document confirmed that MBS was being closely monitored for his involvement in Khashoggi's assassination and advised all royal households to exercise extreme discretion regarding diplomatic exchanges with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That document landed like a bombshell. It proved that the palace had been warned, not only by internal advisors but by official state agencies. And yet, the earrings had not only been accepted, they had been displayed. The fallout extended beyond royal walls. In Washington, members of Congress raised questions about the UK's relationship with Saudi Arabia, citing the earring scandal as evidence of continued Western complacency. In Turkey, journalists and political figures cited the scandal and renewed calls for justice for Khashoggi. In the Middle East, state-run media quietly celebrated the embarrassment of a Western royal family. The media eruption wasn't just about a woman wearing jewelry. It was about what that act represented, the collision of personal ambition, political blindness, and moral cowardice. In an age when every action by public figures is dissected and amplified, Meghan's choice became a cautionary tale. A symbol of how easily values can be compromised, how image can betray truth, and how silence, especially when adorned with diamonds, can scream the loudest. Tonight, the royal illusion shatters. Aides inside Kensington Palace are breaking their silence, revealing that Meghan Markle knowingly wore diamond earrings from Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, just days after journalist Jamal Khashoggi was brutally assassinated. Intelligence officials had warned the palace. Meghan wore them anyway. In this investigation, we uncover the hidden memos, Harry's panicked reaction, and the explosive fallout that insiders now say could end everything. Stay with us. What you're about to see changes everything you thought you knew about the Sussexes.